As I considered composition for the final project, there were two movies that I thought would be really good in conversation with each other: Everything Everywhere All at Once and Polite Society, in large part because of their combat nature. They're both movies that feature a lot of hand-to-hand physical combat. They sometimes use props and swords, but the majority of the fighting they do is hand-to-hand, person-to-person. Both of these movies are extensively informed by Kung Fu, an ancient Chinese style of fighting that is very popular in the Western canon. Both of these movies, in fact, continually make references to the fact that they are doing Kung Fu. We see both characters train in the art, and Ria's website is even called Kung Fu. One of the most visually recognizable tropes of Kung Fu movies is the fighting stance that they take before they begin combat. This is rooted in a Kung Fu tradition of establishing structural integrity, grounding, and power. It acts like a reset before you start fighting.
You divine it again.
While there are a number of visual tropes found in Kung Fu movies that both films use, the most salience can be found in looking at when they differ. Though still heavily informed by Kung Fu, the films begin to diverge stylistically. We see Everything Everywhere All at Once be informed by classic Kung Fu movies, whereas Polite Society is informed by live fighting sports like WWE. The long, well-choreographed fight scenes in Everything Everywhere All at Once really harken to the style of choreographed fight scenes that you see in Kung Fu movies, like Jackie Chan movies, that require multiple people, props, a lot of coordination, and a deep understanding of choreography. In fact, speaking of choreography, Everything Everywhere All at Once stars Michelle Yeoh, who was a Kung Fu action movie star, becoming famous in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. The film makes direct reference to Evelyn's potential other life as a Kung Fu movie star, using clips from Michelle Yeoh's actual life. Part of her popularity centered around the fact that she was not actually a trained martial artist, but rather a dancer, and used that to do her own stunts in her movies. Though Everything Everywhere All at Once does utilize effects like slow motion, we don't see them nearly as much as in Polite Society, and the emphasis that they're used for is far less campy. For Mansoor, absurdism and the dramatization of fight moves is the baseline, whereas for the Daniels, it's more about emphasis. The genre of Kung Fu movies originates from wuxia, which is a genre of Chinese fiction that follows ancient Chinese martial artists defending honor. Most of them were swordsmen, but its popularity, even though it is based in historical fiction, made it so that in the 70s it had a resurgence of popularity, specifically with Kung Fu. Actors like Jackie Chan and Michelle Yeoh found major success in these franchises, and they were incredibly popular with American audiences. While both are undoubtedly their own form of spectacle, Kung Fu movies and WWE differ in one major way: showmanship. Kung Fu movies prioritize drive and technique, where WWE prioritizes what's entertaining and what KOs the fastest. That said, the camp of Kung Fu does show through sometimes, frequently in its sound effects. Although Polite Society's embrace of camp is not in its sound effects, it still resembles WWE in many essential ways. The slow motions that read like instant replays, the dramatic laying on the floor KOs, all really resemble the classic WWE style of fighting. The WWE's larger-than-life approach to showmanship really mirrors Mansoor's. Another very classic staple of WWE fighting is the signature move that many famous wrestlers have that can take an opponent out. Ria's attempts at her spinning kick in the air demonstrate her commitment to becoming the Fury, or her own fight persona similar to that of a WWE fighter. From Stone Cold Steve Austin's stunner to Cody Rhodes' disaster kick, these signature moves really bring out the character of a wrestler. And, narratively speaking, it isn't until Rhea overcomes her greatest opponent, both within and outside of the ring, she is able to pull off her signature move, fully becoming the Fury. We also see the genre conventions go outside just the fights. During the fight in school, we see Rhea's friends acting as the announcers for a game, much like a wrestling match announcer would.
Khan struggles to prove herself as a stunt woman.
But you've got to admire her tenacity.
So, even though both of these films are based in Kung Fu and martial arts traditions as their forms of combat, they both camp things up in their own ways and take cue from different forms of combat media.
So,
Did you see my kick?
Of course I bloody did. It was magical. It was like shit.
Me too, like shit! I'm pretty sure I drew blood.
Oh, so you did.